Hey, what's going on, WBSE and Whiskey Network? How is everybody doing this evening? Tonight, we have such a wonderful guest with us. We have Mr. Freddie Johnson, the legend, the myth, the fisherman, the extraordinaire, the man who paints a picture with his words. He puts you in the history of the time spent at Buffalo Trace. The Hall of Famer, Freddie Johnson. I want to welcome you. And raise my glass to you, kind sir, and everybody else that's joining us. Cheers. Cheers, Freddie.
Salute.
So Freddie, first off, thanks for joining us this evening. Sincerely appreciate it, and sincerely appreciate the friendships over the years. I'd like to jump right into this, if you wouldn't mind. You are a legend of the bourbon community. Your status among the bourbon enthusiasts is surreal, so to speak. How do you deal with the fame that comes with being one of the most recognizable faces in the bourbon communities?
On WBSE and whiskey. First off, it's very humbling. As you guys know, Bill and Chad and I have talked before. I didn't come back here to basically become all that has become with Buffalo Trace and my family and all that. I actually came back here to take care of my dad. It was a promise that I'd made to him, gosh, now almost 30 years ago. And I promised him that if I could in my lifetime, I would work at Buffalo Trace Distillery, because he thought it was very important that he, during his lifetime, be able to tell everyone that our family had 3 direct generations to work at Buffalo Trace. So that was a seed that was planted, but I got recruited by another company and I moved away from here, and he was happy I found a job, but he asked me to make him a promise. He said, I know you're moving away from here. I'm happy you got a job. I'm happy you got a career. He says, but if anything ever happens to me, he said, Freddie, promise me you'll be my caregiver. Promise me you'll take care of me. And quite honestly, I made a commitment that I didn't really understand what I was getting into. And so when my father called me one day on my job, he never did that before, because he felt like personal phone calls at work was not proper. So he calls me at work and he told me that he was terminally ill. And he asked me would I keep my promise and come home and take care of him. So that's really how I ended up back in Frankfurt. And he said, well, since you're back, you might as well start working at the distillery. So I think he kind of like hooked me and reeled me in. He had already had an encounter with Mark Brown. And it's kind of funny the way these things unfold. So Bill, for you and Chad, it's kind of funny. So what happened was this. As you know, Buffalo Trace used to be ancient age. Mm-hmm. And my father, he had lived so long that he inherited all of his buddies' wives. So he was the person that carried them to the beauty salon, and he would carry them to the doctor's office and do all this stuff for them. And whoever, whenever they would have a birthday, they got to sit in the front seat, and he would pick them up from the beauty shop. They got into the front seat. All the other ladies had to sit in the back seat. And then they would come down to the distillery. And part of this process was he would go into the gift shop and he would get them one of the old ancient age shirts. And what the shirt said on it was, on the front it says, I get better with age. And on the back of it says, ancient age Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So that was their tradition. So he goes into the gift shop. The lady's out there. She's just come from the beauty shop. She's got her little head all cocked to one side. And he goes into the gift shop, and there are no more ancient age shirts to be had because they were transitioning over to Buffalo Trace. So my dad's in an awkward situation. He starts to fuss. And the manager didn't know what to do. So they called Mark Brown and told Mark, said, we don't know who this old man is over here, but he's kind of, he's making a little bit of a scene. And so Mark Brown says, well, I'll come over and talk to him. So he comes over, he meets Mark Brown, they get to chatting. And that's when Mark Brown found out that Dad had rolled all the 1 million barrels that had gone into Buffalo Trace Distillery's single barrel warehouse. So they get to chatting. Quite naturally, if you need something really, really hard to find associated with the distillery, Mark Brown usually knows where some of it is. So he manages to find an old shirt that had the "I get better with age" on it. And my dad was happy, but he told him he said, my son's coming back to Frankfurt, and you think you could find something for him to do? Tour guide, Buffalo Trace, here I am. So that's really how the whole thing started. What is interesting is I do a lot of tours for kids. And part of what happened to me is the seed that I try to plant with middle kids in middle school, high school, and the first couple of years of college. I do special tours for them at the distillery. And based on your background, whether it's mechanical engineering, chemistry, science, if you think about marketing, management, all of those things are associated with the spirits that you and I enjoy every day. And so I tailor the tours to them being in school to get them to understand the importance of learning theories and how things fit together. So that started it. So my background, because it was engineering, chemistry, and science, I didn't really think about how that applied to the distillery until I came back from that world. And I started talking to folks, and I said things in ways that basically it made sense to them without using all the techie stuff and the pH factors and the alkalinity and acidity. And I just talked to them about ways that they could taste things at home with friends and family to appreciate the bourbon. And that started it. And it took off, and I started doing tastings in a different way than they would normally being done at the distillery. And that's where the slapping of we call it waking the dog, where I tell everybody to smack their hands and rub them. Well, that was something I learned as a kid from my grandfather on my mother's side. So everybody knows about my dad and my granddad at Buffalo Trace, but very few know that on my mom's side, I'm from the mountains of Kentucky, Breathitt County, blooded Breathitt. And my grandfather was a coal miner. He mined his own coal, and his buddies ran moonshine stills out of the coal mines to cover up the black mold that's normally associated with making whiskey. So it made it harder for the revenuers to find them. But the smacking of the hands, that waking of the dog, is the way that they would check one another's whiskey before they even took a sip of it. And it would tell them a lot about their product even before it touched their lips. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's so cool. Yeah.
So the deal is that those were things as you grow up, okay, you just think about all the things you got exposed to that made you become the writer that you are, to doing what you're doing right now. You got little seeds planted along the way, and it caused you to formulate things in a way that people could relate to the ideas you were trying to share. So all I did was, when I started to become a tour guide, I didn't approach it like, well, this is a warehouse full of barrels, and I approached it like I approached it when I was a kid, because I was in awe of how did these settlers who had no formal training know how to build a warehouse that holds 24,000 barrels at 550 pounds a pop. That's over 6,000 tons of whiskey on timbers that go back to 1797. And that warehouse is still one of the highest rated whiskeys in the world, one of the highest rated warehouses in the world. So I was just in awe of that. And so I started sharing that with people on my tours to get them to look at distilleries and tours when they visit them, not as a distillery, but as all the components, all the entities that go into making the product for that distillery that you enjoy.
Mm.
And there's an art to doing that because all the pieces have to fit.
So quick
See,
question.
you asked, I'm sorry, that's the engineering come out. You asked me to tell you the time, and I told you how to build a damn watch. Okay, so.
That's brilliant.
I got a quick question for you, Freddie.
Yeah.
So
What's that?
what is your educational background?
It's crazy. Okay. So.
And you still don't know what you want to be when you grow up. I get it.
That's exactly right. So, and that's what happened to me. So when I was in school, I was the kid that always got into trouble. Not bad, destructive trouble, but I was always doing things that created a disturbance, so to speak. I was constantly experimenting with things. I was the kid that would take the sulfuric acid. I found out you could put it in a bottle, like a plastic bottle, and you go into a room and you puff on it with your arm, and it smells like a whole bunch of rotten eggs escaped in that room. So I was the kid that did that kind of stuff, right?
Like something Chad would do.
That sounds like Chad. Yep.
More than just whiskey.
So what happened to me was, I'm going to tell you, this is crazy. I did an experiment. I was playing with stuff at home. I like to play with electricity and little different things like that, electronics. And I created a project in my own home. And my mom worked with a field service agent. This was the 4-H and the Future Farm, FFA, and those kind of Future Farmers of America. And she had mentioned to the field service agent about this little project that I had done at home. It scared the hell out of my dad because my father thought I was going to burn the house down because I was always playing with stuff in the basement. She mentioned it to the field service agent. The field service agent met with me at school one day, and she said, I think you need to join the 4-H club. Now, hey, I'm a young kid on the block, and 4-H club is country bumpkin stuff, you know, farmers, and I don't want to be about this. And she said, no. She said, I think you're going to like this because I want you to enter this project in a competition that we have each year. And I think it will inspire a lot of other kids. I'm like, She said, no, trust me. She said, join the 4-H club and let's enter this in the local competition. Okay. So all my friends were making fun of me and laughing at me because now I'm a 4-H clubber and I got the little 4-H club clover heart on my jacket, and it's kind of embarrassing. But my project won. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of cool. So she said, all right, Freddie, we're going to enter it in the district competition. Okay. She said, you get to go somewhere. I said, oh, really? She said, yeah, you get to go to Louisville. I said, okay, this is cool. So I go to Louisville. We win again. She says, She said, we're going to go into the divisional competition with this. And I'm really? She said, yeah, you get to go again. So I travel again. It wins the division. Then it wins the regional. We entered in a national competition, and I won national recognition in the national competition. I get to go to Washington, D.C., Smithsonian Institute. I stay at Howard University. Begin to get the drift. Yeah. And my whole world exploded. And all of a sudden, I realized there's a bigger world than this little local community that I live in. And because of that, when I left out of grade school, a physical science teacher in high school, Mr. Logan, hooked up with me, and he started showing me other things that you can do. And she said, he was telling me, he said, Freddie, the world basically is your oyster. You know, you can do a lot of things that you want to do. The deal, though, was, like we just said, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So my dad wanted me to go to Kentucky State University because the Kentucky State University is an African-American college. It's right across the street. I've been to Howard University, so I got a chance to kind of savor what it would be like to be with an ethnic group and growing up. But when I went there, you ready for this? It's just like these kids that get to go to Montessori schools and stuff like that instead of going through traditional schools, private learning and teaching. I got there and I was bored, and I became the disruptive student in college that I was in grade school and high school because I was not challenged anymore. I was the kid that let the frogs out in biology class. I did all kinds of, I mean, oh, it was bad. So what happened was I lost interest, and I was like, to heck with this.
Guy.
So I went to work at a hospital. And from the hospital, I got a job in a chemistry lab, and I used to do PKUs on babies when you do the blood serum check.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of a team that did the operated the electrophoresis machine, and you check the protein content of the serum going to the brain. Pretty cool. And in the midst of this and working at this hospital, one of my buddies said, you know what? With all the stuff you're doing, you need to go talk to this recruiter for AT&T. And I'm like, oh, hell no. You know, climbing on telephone poles. And we were the kids that when somebody was in a manhole out in the middle of the highway, we were the kids that would drive right up to it and slam on our brakes real quick like we're about to run down to the manhole. So the image that I have, again, image was the wrong image of the environment that he was trying to get me into. So he said, this is a different part of AT&T. So I go in for this interview and put me through a battery of tests, and they're looking at everything, weird stuff. They also looked at retention and ability to grasp new ideas and concepts. And what AT&T was building was they were building a new core group of, like the folks out in Silicon Valley that do all the weird things with technologies and stuff.
Does this kind of cover why you got top secret clearance with AT&T?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so it's
How
not,
did you know that? You remember?
What? We don't know things.
We don't know it.
little guys in suits ain't going to pull up on you, are they?
Yeah, that's what those sirens were for.
Yeah, that's the kind of sirens work.
I'll continue, Freddie. So you got your top secret clearance with AT&T because you were.
I was doing pretty good.
It's always
He's like, I can say no more.
You just well, like.
So believe it or not, that's kind of like what happened. So AT&T basically put me through, they challenged me. And every 2 years, I moved into another part of AT&T, and I did things in operations, engineering. I did fiber optics, digital microwaves, network operations center, underground military sites, all those things. And the last thing that we got national recognition for is what is in use today on AT&T's network. It's called the STAR network. And that's why you don't have to make multiple phone calls when you are making your airline reservation, your hotel reservation, your car rentals, restaurants that you want to eat at while you're on your business trip. You just hit prompts on your phone. And it's a way of cranking back your call and reinitiating that same call to another party without tying up the rest of the network. So it's called the STAR network, but we got recognition for that. We had just finished that bill when my father called and said he was terminally ill. So my educational background is Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, University of Michigan, Harvard. We did miscellaneous stuff with Kentucky, and then I traveled all over, and they put us in concentrated courses that you would take the equivalent of a year-long course, and you would complete it in like 6 weeks. When I would go to these classes, we just stayed there for 2 or 3 months at a time, but it was focusing us to find out if we could migrate to the next level. And I did all the way up. Like I say, it worked out pretty good, bottom line. So I ended up in New York. I ended up in New York down on 6th Avenue. And thanks to my father, I will tell you why this is so important, and I'm going to shut this down. I'm out on the farm with my dad, and we're talking about this house that I was building on the farm up from the distillery. A guy comes by in a truck, and he hollers out the window, and he says, "Hey, Freddie, have you seen what's going on in New York?" And I said, "No." I said, "What's happening?" He said, you need to go and look at the TV and see what's going on. So my dad and I go in the house, turn on the TV, and we see the planes flying into the World Trade Center.
Mm.
And my dad looks at me and he hugs me. And the reason, my commute in from New York to downtown, from New Jersey, I lived over in New Jersey, and we took the Hoboken, it's Hoboken, Erie, Lackawanna, and you take the path into New York, and it drops you off in the bottom of the World Trade Center, and that's where you catch the subway down to where you're going in downtown New York. And my commute put me underneath the World Trade Center at the time that it was hit. And had I not done what I've done and I'd chosen to stay in New York, which they gave us the opportunity to do, I would not be here talking to you today. So that's why when we had those conversations back in the little room, we went back in the room and did a toast, they gave me this cool barrel head that I still cherish. But it makes you realize that for some reason, each of us on this call, we walk this earth for a reason. And we don't even know why. But we constantly touch lives along the way. And that's what happened to me. So that's why when you ask the question about me and my educational background, it's off the chart. And if I'd stayed in Frankfurt, I would have probably never, ever be where I am today. But I'm right back home again. But the deal is, I now have all this information just floating around. And people look at me and they say, well, what do you do at Buffalo Trace? And I say, I'm a tour guide. And they go like, yeah, but what else do you do? I'm like, nothing. I'm a tour guide.
Freddie,
Well, what do you want to be? Nothing. I want to be a tour guide. Drink bourbon. That's it. You know?
I'm living the life already. What more?
Yeah.
You are definitely more than a tour guide. You're a historian. You are a traveled man. You're an educated man. You are somebody who reaches out to people like us that are viewing this right now, that will view it down in the future. You are just one of these guys that
He's the face of bourbon.
you are the face of bourbon. You are.
No, I'm someone easy to drink with. That's who I am.
It's like the Adam Sandler movie. Freddie, I'm all over the place. I have hundreds of questions sitting in front of me to ask you, and they don't. I just like talking to you. So you went to New York. You worked for AT&T. You had top secret clearance. You were there for 9/11. Well, you just came home because of.
Yeah, I was back. And actually, I had. When we got into this assignment, I was working with Bell Labs. And so to do part of this, I had relocated back to Georgia. And I was trying to take care of my dad. And so the agreement that AT&T did was they said, what we're going to do for you, Freddie, is this. We're going to let you live wherever you think you need to live. And the arrangement that we have with you, that we'll have with you is this. As long as the meeting or the site that you need to go to is not in New York or New Jersey, we will cover your expenses for going to those sites while you're taking care of your dad.
Nice. That's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And so here we go. And I see Jim, he's got this look. So Jim knows exactly what I'm talking about. So all of a sudden, you think you can handle the world. So you're doing these calls, and you're doing all this stuff. You're doing this. And in the core of this, my dad, when he started his chemo treatments, never told me what he was going through. So that's why I tell people, when you get into bourbon and you start collecting really good bourbon, sometimes you become self-centered and focused on getting all these bourbons, and you lose sight of what they're really for.
It's so much to be said about that, what they're really for.
Yep.
The step back for 1 second, though. So you came back to take care of your dad. You your family's legacy is in Buffalo, well, what is now Buffalo Trace Distillery. Myself, I follow in my father's footsteps and some family members, a lot of family members, to be honest with you, being a railroader. I love sitting down with them, listening to them talk about the old days. Your family worked with some of the legends of the whiskey industry. You know, the Elmers, the Blantons, the Taylors, so forth and whatnot. What's one of the coolest stories that was shared with you? I mean, you may not have been a part of the industry at the time, but you were going to be. Your family knew you were going to be. And
sometimes while I was down there, I didn't think that because I got into a lot of trouble as a kid down there. But a legacy. So I've been there under three different living master distillers. So I was there with Elmer T. Lee, I was there with Gary Gayhart, and currently with Harlan Wheatley, all at the same distillery. But I also got a chance to do sessions and panels with some of the folks at the other distilleries, like the Jimmy Russells, okay, and Parker Beam and Booker No, and these folks. And one of the guys that I truly enjoyed sitting down and chatting with was Lincoln Henderson, believe it or not.
Woodford Reserve, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Lincoln was the one that came up with Angel's Envy. But nobody knew what he was trying to do. And basically they shut him down. And so he retired and he created a product that he never really got a chance to enjoy. And that's the key to me, to what this industry is all about. And the reason that I mentioned Lincoln is he was a very humble person. He was very quiet. He was very introverted. He's like a Jimmy Russell. If you ran into Jimmy Russell walking down the street or at an event, if you did not know who he was, you would not understand how dynamic he actually is and all the things that he
Time
did.
to meet him. And you're 100% right on that.
Okay. And all these old guys were like that. So that's, to me, that's kind of like my influence, or who influenced me. It was giving me a chance to go into these different groups and travel around. And I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was like Willy Wonka in a chocolate factory. I don't even say anything. I'm sitting there in awe of all the stuff that these folks have been through. So one of the coolest things that a story that I like to tell is how the antique collection got started of Buffalo Trace Distillery.
That's a really good
Some of the
time.
they're the highest rated, most sought after whiskeys in the world. And it started with a bunch of these old guys, called them stag dinners. So if Amy was on this phone right now, Amy and Meredith and Christy might be on the phone. I'm not sure if Christy Wood is on the phone or not. But they would get these old guys together once a year and they would throw them a party. It was called the Stag Retirement Party. And they would sit around, like you mentioned, talking about the good old days. But they would talk about good whiskeys. And so they got into a discussion and they were talking about really good whiskey. And so Mark Brown, who I admire a lot just because of the environment that he creates, that started at Buffalo Trace. And he says, well, what would be a good whiskey? And they said, a barrel proof whiskey. And he was like, oh, really? And they said, yeah. They said, we guarantee you that if you do a barrel proof bourbon, it's going to take off. So what they did was they tried this. And so they got these old guys, I think it was 12 of them. And when they walk into this room, at each setting around the master distiller's table, I think they started off with 14 glasses, 12 guys, 14 glasses, but they were single barrels of barrel-proof bourbon that they had placed on a grid in front of each one of them. And those old guys went through there, and the first thing they did was, you know how we take bourbon and we nose it when we're trying to figure out what's going on with it? So these old guys, they started off and they would take the glasses, and the reason that you swirl it is you increase the surface area, which allows more volatiles, more vapors to come up, and it gives you a better nose. So they were swirling around and they would do this. And if you watch them, the ones that they absolutely did not want any part of, before they even touched their lips, they called them out. And they kept doing that. And then they came up with a small group at each location, nobody coaching anybody else. And they had just a couple of glasses in front of them. And then they tasted those and they called those out. And it ended up, every one of those guys, Elmer, my dad, Ronnie Evans, Leonard Riddle, all of them were on the table. They all ended up with one glass in front of them. You ready for this? It was all the same barrel. And it became George T. Stagg, uncut, unfiltered barrel proof.
Wow.
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 So that's why, isn't that crazy?
That's
so
crazy.
I tell people in this industry, it's cool.
That is beyond cool.
Isn't that amazing? It was all the same.
I
And
actually
they said,
goosebumps listening to that because that's the first time I heard about the antique collection coming to fruition. Love the antique collection. Love what they're doing with it now. But hearing that, I just figured it was some sort of marketing thing. The majority of us old school whiskey drinkers, yeah, we love barrel proof. But how did the antique collection come about? Wow.
so now you know. So now you
An
know.
awesome story.
Awesome. That is awesome.
So you begin to understand that when you put the pieces together, the motto of the distillery begins to make sense. So the motto of the distillery is only 4 words: honor tradition, embrace change. So if Mark had not been receptive to doing something different, it would have never gotten created because he would have shut it down.
Let me ask you a personal question. Well, somewhat personal question. You come from a technology background.
Bourbon.
Do you think bourbon background, but
Bourbon.
technology kind of mid-level area? So you started in technology, starting your adult life out. Do you think with modern technology, 21st century technology, with old school tradition, do you think there could be too much technology in the craft of a good whiskey?
It depends on what your goal is. Okay? If my objective is to crank out a product really fast, to minimize my personal investment, and still get something that I can get a bang for my buck, technology works fine. But Harlan Wheatley is a chemical engineer, and he says that you cannot rush Father Time, and you cannot cheat Mother Nature. So what actually happens is, we were having a session with Harlan, and what he explained to us was, people talk about that red line in the barrel stave, but that's only a snippet of the significance. It actually starts with your fermentation process and how you cooked your grains. And then what actually happens is, that's 50% of your taste profile is the preparatory work. When it goes into that barrel, that red line shows you the depth of the penetration of the whiskey, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So what actually happens is, as the whiskey goes beyond the char, it's like making simple syrup. That heat, when you char the inside of that barrel, if you've ever made simple syrup, you'll notice something. When you turn the pan on, the sugar starts to melt, and it's a really clear liquid. You leave it on long enough, it caramelizes right at the base. But if you watch closely, something very interesting happens. It's bubbling at the base, it's starting to caramelize, but the sugar on top is still granular. If you watch closely, something interesting will happen. All of a sudden, the heat will go through that sugar and the whole thing will collapse down, and it'll all become clear liquid or it'll become caramel. It's an amazing process. So the way it works is the reason for the different degrees of char on the inside is that the intensity of that heat is charring the wood on the inside that the whiskey comes in direct contact with when it first goes in the barrel. But the heat actually goes all the way through the wood. So you've got all these sugars and saps and rosins behind that char there that are just waiting to contribute to the flavors. So what happens is, if I put my barrel in the warehouse in a place that's cool, and the whiskey gets a chance to go out deep into the wood, those alcohol molecules actually break down those caramelized sugars and saps and rosins in the fibers of the wood well beyond the char. Those are the flavors that linger on your palate. So you have, I get off on this stuff, but you have to think about that when you're talking about what can technology do to that. Technology can't do a darn thing to that, because that alcohol has to be in contact with those sugars and with those fibers for an extended period of time to break them down. So putting them in an environment where you're playing a lot of hard rock music and it's shaking the barrels all around and all that, so you get a lot of vibration. It moves the whiskey in and out of the wood, but that depth and penetration is not there. So technology allows you to nail it to produce what you want, but Mother Nature and Father Time basically allows you to enhance that to the next level. So,
Freddie,
combination of both.
the beautiful thing about whiskey, is taking your time. And what you just said about answering the last question, you could add whatever you want, but it still takes time. It still needs its natural progression. So when I grab glass and I'm talking to a buddy of mine and I raise a glass up to him, we've conversed, we've shared our moments. Whiskey is not something to be rushed. Bourbon is not something to be rushed. It's something to be just kind of let go on its own, and it's going to tell you when you're ready to go, when it's ready to
I like the smile on your
But
face.
you're right.
go. So did I.
Here's the kicker. So we're doing this thing. Buffalo Trace is in the middle of this $1.2 billion expansion, but it's all on the front end and the warehouses that we're building on the back end. So when we talk to Harlan about it, the computer, the technology that you're referring to, allows us to basically nail the cooking temperatures, to nail the proof coming off the steel, to be able to nail, the alkalinity factors, the acid factors, the pH. We can do all that more accurately now with technology. So we're making bourbon under 18 labels. Well, each one has a definitive taste profile. So what you want to do is be able to nail that and repeat it each time. And that's what technology allows us to do, is it allows us to refine the taste profiles of that Weller bottle that you got in front of you there. So part of it has to be on the front end, the way we cook the grains, the way we fermented the grains, how we've gotten it ready. And then the other piece is Mother Nature and Father Time in the barrel that ultimately becomes that Weller 12. So if you don't do it right on the front end, the end result is not going to be what you're looking for. So that's the beauty of technology today, is knowing how to use it to arrive at the product that you hope will be the end result of that effort. So technology is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, bouncing along with the whole technology thing, you are obviously a people person, and that is where you thrive and where you shine. What are your thoughts on social media usage to reach out to the bourbon community as a whole, especially when things are a little bit difficult? Do you personally use it? Like, I know Buffalo Trace, all sorts of big brands do it, but what about you personally? I'm interested on that take, how you use social media or don't.
Okay. Yes, I use it. Sometimes no, don't. When I think a lot of these two birds up here in my corner, I think a lot of Chad and Bill. When I leave Buffalo Trace, I'm a very private person. I do some things on social media with people that I click with or that I've had a significant emotional event with or a moment with. But I try to not let that influence my personal life. And it's because of something that happened. Remember, I told you I got caught up in my career. So, and that's why Jim kind of like looked and smiled. I got caught up in a world that every 2 years.
Uh-oh. Hold tight, guys. A little technical difficulties. He's coming back. He's coming back. He's on his way.
He'll come back.
He's coming back. He's relogging in right now. His video is back. Welcome back.
There we go. Do I need to go back to gallery again?
No, yes, go back. Yeah, to see everybody. Absolutely.
Look at this, Tasha. I'm being high tech. I'm gonna go forward being high tech here. Okay.
I'm so proud of you.
So this is very unedited and very live.
Very real.
I've had something in my eye for the last 35 minutes. That was very irritating.
So, okay, so Julia, part of my, I guess I got it from my mom. There's a crazy way of interpersonally dealing with people and relating to people. Mm-hmm. My dad was very kind of like, you know, there's just things you do, things you don't do, things you don't mess with. And just, he was kind of like, he had some pretty definitive ways about looking at the world. Because of all this crazy stuff that I was involved in, I got to go to Harvard and I was with Dr. Max Kostick. And it was a behavioral pattern thing that he had put together. It's called a PAPI system. I thought it was rather interesting. His was PAPI. And I come back here and I'm dealing with PAPI bourbon. But it was a behavioral way of looking at folks. And I was part of the human resources assessment program for performance of employees and people that could become potential managers or marketing folks or whatever. And there was a set of criteria associated with behavior patterns that set you to do that. I never thought about you do that every day in your life. You make assessments of folks before you even know anything about them. And what this process teaches you to do is to basically shield your own baggage and look at people and evaluate them based on their contribution and who they really are, not on what your baggage makes you see through a screen. And it was, and so I do that now. So like when I meet people at the distillery, they don't even know my background, but I talk to them about who they are. And have you been to another distillery? And what do you know about bourbon? Does bourbon have to be made in Kentucky? So I just ask a lot of fun questions on the front end that lets them know that I'm not trying to make them feel uncomfortable. I'm not trying to make them intimidated. I'm trying to get them to look at it from a kid's point of view, to look at it in such a way that you want to absorb like you do. Why do you only share it with
your tools?
Yeah.
Speaking of your
Huh?
tools.
Oh no.
Oh, did we lose everybody?
Nope, he's there. He's just waiting for the tours.
Speaking of your tours, so first off, I want to start this by Bill and I were down in Kentucky about 6 or 7 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was
You
our
met
first.
Freddie then.
Well, we didn't know Freddie then. So we were down there.
Okay, yeah.
We were down there. It was our first time on the bourbon trail. You know, we come out of this tour, and the group that we were with, Eric Parks, Scott Lastwitz, Bob and Diane Johnson, some dear friends of ours. I don't want to talk about the night before because we had a hell of a night. But we came out of this tour, and the one thing about me is I go on tours everywhere I go. I love seeing industry working. I love whether it's a paper mill or a fly rod fishing place, a beer company, a whiskey company, whatever it is. I love seeing a product from start to finish. And I've probably, in my time, I've probably taken thousands of tours. And I came out of the tour with you. And I didn't know you from Adam. And I came out of that tour thinking, my God, this dude just put us here all the way back to the mid 1800s, full circle. I walked out of that tour, head spinning, big grin on my face, Freddie. And I turned to Bill, I was like, Bill, that was the best tour I've ever did in my life. So during your tours, I have a personal favorite from my time there. Is there a favorite thing that you like to do? And is there a story that you're allowed to tell from all the tours that you've done?
The most significant, two things have happened to me within the last couple of months that basically totally blew me away. So this past Monday, which is what, July 20th, I had the opportunity to hand a lady off to her husband, and I was standing in for her father who had passed away.
Wow.
Oh my.
And
Oh my
the
goodness.
irony,
Oh,
ready for this?
All doing
And the
that.
irony, all right, so Bill, the irony of the whole thing, all right, so I see Bill, Bill's got this look on his face. I always like to watch Bill. So anyway, yeah. So what actually happened, so Chad, what happened to me was this. Just like when you came in on the tour. So this tour happens, it's one of the last tours of the day. And when the groups get too big, we would split them. And on this particular tour, there was this lady, she and her girlfriend were supposed to be going to Cleveland, Ohio to a concert. And she had said, no, let's not go to the concert. Let's go to a tour at Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Hell yeah.
Right? And on this tour, what she had done was she had this guy that she wanted her girlfriend to meet. And so he was on the tour. He was in this group. They met without even realizing what was going on. So what happened was the group is real big. He gets introduced to her, and it's time to split the group up because it's too big. And what he did was Ricky says, he grabbed her by the hand and he says, come, let's take a tour with this guy. And he says he doesn't even know why he did it, but he says, I think this guy's going to be a fun guy to take a tour with. So they come over to my side, we go on a tour, and we start having fun. And as you know, the stoppers, there's one that's called an O, which is where the jockey's hitting hitting the horse with the whip. And she had done something, and I said, I think this is your stopper. Yeah, you got it, Tasha.
Right there.
And so I said, I said, what letter is this? And she said, oh. And I said, say it a little louder. She said, oh. And I said, yeah, that's what the jockey said that's what the horse said when the jockey hit him with the whip. And I gave her the stopper. Well, the two of them started laughing. They started having a lot of fun. They loosened up. Ready for this? A year and a half later, they come back to the distillery on another tour together. And underneath the water tower where he first met her, he proposed to her on another one of my tours.
Hey!
You're done. I'm over it.
And a year after that, at the same site, I gave her hand in marriage to him.
Oh.
And the reason was, she said, Freddie, of all the people that I know, I think that my dad, if he was alive, I think you would be the person that he would say he would be proud to have you hand me off to Ricky. So what we did was, they had a watch that was her father's, and I put the watch on, and as we did the closing comments, I said, just like this watch, time has stood still. And now it's time to put a new battery in the watch because you're starting another life together. And they just kind of like, so we did a toast and did a bunch of stuff. But of all the things I've done, that's one of the key things that happened to me. And the second thing that happened was with a bottle of Double Eagle. And if anyone knows about the whole Double Eagle story,
Double Eagle.
that is like the holy grail, the unicorn of all unicorns. I had done a tour a few years back, a couple of years ago, with a guy that had come in to do a barrel pick, and he had done a tour with his father. And he had been stationed, he was part of the Iraq-Afghanistan group. They did a lot of SEAL work, a lot of COVID stuff. And he was there with his father, and it was a bucket list item because his father was dying. Fast forward, they do a barrel pick, and he got the only bottle of Double Eagle that went to, I think it was Montana.
Good.
They come in here for a barrel pick, and he called me in advance and says, are you going to be with us on the barrel selection today? And I said, well, I wasn't, but I can stop down there if you want to, so I've got to do another tour. And he said, okay. So I'm doing a private tour with a military guy that's getting ready to be deployed into the same environment that he just came out of. So we go in, we stop into Warehouse H, and after they do the barrel selection, he says, I've got something here. He said, Freddie, I remember what you said about good bourbon and special bottles. He reaches into his backpack. Now here's this Double Eagle. He's carrying it around in a backpack. He brings it out, and everybody just looks. And I'm looking at him, and he said, I know you don't remember everything about my dad and I, but it was a special moment, the bucket list item for my dad coming to that distillery because it was one of his favorite distilleries because of the products that came out of there. He said, Freddie, my dad's passed away. He says, and I know your dad's passed away. He says, but of all the people in the world that I could think to share a drink from this bottle with, it's you. So what he did was he had Susanna Hubler, who was our barrel selection person. He said, I want you to get 5 glasses. And he opens up this bottle, and that's when this guy that was the Navy SEAL and his wife was there, and it was his wife's way of giving him a bucket list, kind of like one of those things to have as he's going away. And he opened it up, and we did a pour, and all 5 of us did a toast in honor of those that had fallen before them, and in hopes that he got back safely. but in honor of the fathers at the same time. So those are the two stories that, to me, is the epitome of what you represent as representatives from, from the Whiskey Society. It's the things that you do. You make me feel special. I'm not the one that's special here. It's what you do that makes me feel honored.
What we do
You're part of what you
is
do.
nothing compared to who and what you represent.
Yeah, I beg to differ with you, Freddie. You really are.
And I'm honored to hear that from you. But
Yeah.
I'm also humbled to be able to share time with you. We've had multiple times together, talking, chatting over the phone, text messages. You're one of the persons that I aspire to be. Not aspire to be, but like, you're just such a cool guy, and you totally get it, and you take things in stride, and you're so humble on every approach in life, and that's such a beautiful thing. It's a rarity. Uh, the ending of the movie Neat. The ending of the movie Neat.
Oh, Lord.
With your father and brother, and my God, I have my own saying with my friends. Hey, let's drink whiskey around the fire pit. Let's tell some stories and tell some lies. That's my what your father said to you is, we don't always have time for cheers. We don't always have time for cheers. Let's be in this moment. Let's be in this moment and just enjoy my friend's company, my brother's company, and let's open these bottles. Let's open these bottles and pour a little more and just be in the moment. So the majority of the people in WBSE knows what you said, but what is behind that cheers when I pass my glass off to my good friend and I say, cheers, brother.
So this is a little Weller 12. All right. So a couple of unspoken rules. So I don't think so Julian's never he's never had this encounter. So as you know, like when we were at the WBSE event, there were a lot of new bourbons and stuff that hit the tables. The unspoken rule, no matter who it is and how happy you are to see them, if I don't like you, I won't bring out my good stuff. I won't even tell you I got it because I don't want you asking for it, okay? So that's the first unspoken rule. The second unspoken rule is this. Have you ever noticed something? If no matter how happy you are that somebody stopped by to see you, maybe you haven't seen them in a long time, but if you're getting ready to go to another event, it's not the right time. You won't bring it out. Mm-hmm. You only bring out the good stuff when you're about to spend time with someone you truly enjoy being with. And I want you to reflect back on that and think about how many times you have been sitting around with somebody, you bring out a good bottle, you get to talking, you nail the bottle, and all of a sudden you look around and you say, oh my Lord, look at the time. Time ceases to be a factor. Mm-hmm. So that's what my dad shared with me was two things that happened prior to that. The first one was I did not understand chemo. And I didn't understand this whole thing with the medications and the treatments and all that. But I'm trying to take care of my dad. But my dad was so happy that we came back, he still wanted me to go toast with him every evening that I came in from Buffalo Trace. And what happened to me, Bill, one evening was I poured him a drink of his favorite bourbon. He got it up to his nose and he smelled of it. And he looked at me real funny and he says, "Oh man, what is this?" I said, "Dad, this is one of your favorites." And he said, "Doesn't smell right." And he took a sip of it and he made this Mr. Yuck face. And he says, "Freddie, I can't drink this." I said, "Dad, this is one of your favorites." He said, "Oh man, I can't drink it." Now, I'm going to show you how crazy this is. I had discovered, I'm trying to keep my dad alive. I discovered that I could mix, of all things, Diet Pepsi with his iced tea. And he would drink his iced tea when I fed him his supper. And I didn't know what I had done until I talked to the oncologist. And she said, "Freddie, what you actually did was chemically, you neutralized the metallic taste that the radiation treatments give you when you're taking chemo." I just stumbled upon it. So here I am. He can't drink this bourbon. So I'm like, okay. I said, "Here, give me the glass back." So I take the glass back and I turn around and I mixed it with some Diet Pepsi, swirled it around with a little bit of ice, and I gave it back to him and said, "Here, Dad, try this one. See if this one's any better." My dad gets it up to his nose and he smiles. And he takes a sip of it and he looks at me and he says, Freddie, you can drink this one." And I looked at him and said, "Dad, it's the same hooch. All I did was put some Diet Pepsi in it." You ready for this? My dad looked at me and he said, "Doesn't matter, son." I said, "Beg your pardon?" He said, "Freddie, it doesn't matter." He said, "What's important is I can have a drink with you."
Mm.
He says, "Never ever forget that." He says, "Don't worry about how your friends drink your bourbon." He says, "Remember why you bought the bottle out. You bought it out because you were people you care about."
Mhm.
He says, "In the world that we live in today," Julia's over here nodding, so I like to watch. The hat gives her away, but she's got the little yeah. So the deal is this: in the world that we live in today, I want you to think about how many of your friends and family members are on medication. And a lot of times they've got this medical baggage, but when we all get together as a group, they're not ready to let people know medically or maybe physically something that's going on within their personal lives. They're just not ready for people to know. And so what they do is they have learned to compensate for some of these flavors that medication gives them, these off flavors, by mixing them with crazy things.
Mm.
And it neutralizes the effects of the medication so that they can appreciate and enjoy a sip of maybe a bourbon or wine or whiskeys or whatever. And they do it in such a way that they can still have a drink with everyone else. And it happened accidentally with my dad. But then I get into groups when I'm doing tours. And I start talking about this because sometimes people will comment like, "Well, when I bring out my pappies, if somebody grabs some damn Diet Pepsi, I'm about to take my bottle back."
Hey, Chad, you want to tell Freddie
Yeah.
about your punch?
And that's when I look at them and I say, "Well, why would you do that?" And they say, "Well, they just running good pappy." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, why'd you bring the bottle out?"
So
He said, "Because it's good bourbon and I wanted to share it with them." And I said, "So why are you taking the bottle back? Because you don't like the way you're drinking." They kind of look at it. But then I tell them about what happened to my dad, and they just look like, gosh, how many friends have I hurt their feelings by making a comment like that before I pour the drink? So that's why a lot of times at these events, a lot of people won't drink when you talk about this is a really good bourbon because they don't know, they're intimidated by it. They don't know how to approach it. And they don't want to get embarrassed or have you embarrass them. So they just pass on them. They leave them alone. You ever notice people doing that when you bring out some really good stuff? A lot of times they won't drink it
They won't drink
because
it, yeah.
they don't know how to drink it.
Yeah.
Bourbon.
So, yeah.
So,
But-
Fred,
But that's why when Julia comes in, she's styling. That's why I said like Whiskey Chicks and Peggy No, Monica Wolf. There's a bunch of them out there. Fawn Weaver with Uncle Nearest. Fawn Weaver is a good friend of mine. She and her husband Keith. And we started getting into this thing. I'm trying to get you to understand. Women are becoming a part of this. And at your society session, it was obvious they were there.
they're
Okay. And the reason that there's a lot of women involved with WBSE is because you make them feel comfortable.
Mhm.
They feel comfortable in that environment. Look at Tasha's like, yes, that's very true. Okay.
It's very true.
Look at Tom.
Okay.
These
So
guys are
here's
great.
what happens. So I do a lot of special tours. I'm doing one for I do for 5-star and 5-diamond restaurants. And this maitre d' made a comment one time about we will not serve our pappies and our exclusive bourbons for a certain way. So really.
No.
So I tell him the story about my dad and what happened. And now what they will do is this. If you come in there, you order your bourbon in a weird way, the diplomatic, the socially acceptable way of doing this is you say, okay, I'm not in the habit of serving it this way. So I don't know the right portions, the right composition of mixers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do your regular pour of pappy. I will give you another glass with ice, and I will give you the mixer that you've indicated. And I offer you the opportunity to mix it the way that you would like it. So what you do very subtly is you tell them, okay, I don't care how you drink the bourbon. I just want you to be able to enjoy it with the rest of us.
Mm.
They never forget that you did that because it says that you've taken it beyond the product in the bottle and you recognize them as a person. So it doesn't matter who they are or what their background is or what their baggage is. You made me feel like a person.
Mm.
And the product
Freddie,
and the product in the bottle, that's just a conduit. This liquid in here is just like copper wires carrying electricity. It's just a conduit that allows you the opportunity to connect with and spend time with someone you enjoy being with. That's all it is.
Beautiful.
Freddie, so everything I heard today, I could sit here and be in the same room with you and just
For hours.
4 hours. Literally.
We gotta go.
And wearing my Viking helmet of horns. I could just hang out with you all day long, all week long. Maybe you take me to your Sunday fishing holes and get some of the big boys. I know you're avid fisherman. Oh my God, it's so much I want to just sit down and talk with you about. This was probably one of the most open and honest and just, brother, talk to me and thank you for being you conversations I've ever had in my life.
I feel comfortable. I like watching Tasha's face. Kind of like she's like my little happy camper.
Tasha, let's poke at her for a minute.
Oh, good
She's
God.
the biggest Freddie fangirl I've ever
I-
met.
Listen, I've yet to be to Buffalo
we
Trace,
love
but
you, baby, we love you. Hey, Freddie, we thank you honestly for everything you do, for your family's legacy, and you follow in the footsteps. We just want to raise a glass. Bill, come on, raise a glass with me, brother, and thank Freddie.
Thank you, sir.
cheers to that.
Freddie,
Thank you.
cheers,
We want
brother.
to have you back, brother.
Cannot wait to hang out with you again.